Okay, guys, welcome to this morning's Fife Property Show, and we've got a brilliant show today. The future of the Fife Buy-To-Let Market in 2022. Rents are going up, property prices are up. Where is it all going to end? QVT! Good morning and welcome to the Fife Property Show this morning. So we've got our esteemed colleague, Lettings Director Richard Cook here. How are you this morning, Richard?
Good morning, Jim. Yeah, I'm good. What about you?
Pretty good, aye. Wired and fired as usual, but you did expect that. How's everybody else out there? Give us a big thumbs up if you're feeling fantastic. Give us a smiley face if it's really windy.
It's wild out there today.
So, the headlines here, I mean, this is, where is this all going to end? I mean, look at this. Fife rents are up 7.6% in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
Fife house prices are up 14.8% in the last 12 months. Fife landlords are taking advantage of ultra-low mortgage rates, as well as everybody else, to be honest. And then finally, this is what the clincher is. The new EPC rules could cost Fife landlords about £10,000 or more per property. That's absolutely crazy. So we're going to be discussing this today with Richard, because Richard's got more knowledge on the EPC regulations as it currently stands. I'm a bit of an old hat in this. I have tended to like, oh, Richard, just go and you deal with it now. It's like, because the legislative matters now, and I know the fundamentals about how to build wealth and all the rest of it, and I can take care of that side, and you're fantastic on the I would call it the bureaucratic side, really, isn't it?
Yeah. But like you say, I mean, the headlines there, the market the last 12 months has just been on the up and up, and then obviously 2021's been a good year for investors and landlords and things, and obviously things like mortgage rates and that have been great. So yeah, it's interesting to discuss what 2022 is going to bring. So good subject for this morning.
I mean, we'll look at what happened in 2021, the Fife Buy-To-Let Market, and give your opinion as to what lies ahead for Fife landlords in 2022. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
On a positive note, Fife house prices have rocketed. Rents have risen faster than inflation at the start of the year. We have actually benefited as well. I mean, some people have actually benefited. I mean, it's really the house owners that have benefited from the land and buildings transaction tax holiday since then. But really, landlords haven't, because landlords tend to go for a lot lower than that, don't they? They tend to go for anything below 100,000 because the numbers make absolute sense.
Typically, it's these ex-local authorities around about that price mark, that are most appealing to landlord investors.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to make a decent return in property investment if you're buying something. It's a lot of money. Well, in Fife anyway, it is. I don't know where it is. In Glasgow, it probably might be a wee bit different. Aberdeen's going to be different. So all different areas. Dundee is probably slightly on par with us a bit. And Edinburgh's probably going to be different as well, because that tends to be finance. So what transpired out of Edinburgh, I remember when I was looking into this, the Edinburgh market, it tends to be more dominated by people in the financial sector. They're all private renters. It's very, very rare in the Edinburgh sector that you get actually people on the other end of the spectrum, I would say. So the ultra low interest rates as well has helped, Fife landlords benefit from that, as well as, the Fife homeowners, when you think about that. The cautious note, regulations will require us to make the buy-to-let rental properties more eco-friendly. This could cost up to about £10,000 or more with this. So, let's have a look at this point. So first point, Richard, let's talk about this. Do you want to you want to go over this? Fife rents will continue to rise in 2022. Do you think that's going to be the case?
I think they will continue to rent. I mean, of course, the demand's still there. We were looking at what the availability of rental properties are. Just on Thursday there, we had a chat, and there's 55 available properties in the whole of Fife. So that obviously is going to, the demand's still going to be there until the supply could obviously be replenished. So that supply and demand relationship is going to continue to push rents up. Fife Buy-To-Let landlords have seen an average rent and Fife rise by about 7.6% in the last 12 months, and that I see continuing.
What do you think? What do you think has driven that?
Well, the number of Fife properties available for rent on the portals and things, like I say, any one time is roughly about between 35 and 40%. But like I say, we looked at it in the whole of Fife on Thursday, I think it was, we checked, and it's like 55 available properties. And just before Christmas, it was only 54. So there's not been much change, and there's been a lot of, obviously, demand and action being taken by tenants actively seeking properties. I mean, we've done quite a few transactions lately on new lets, but there's still not that supply to feed that demand. So I think demand has increased, and there's several reasons for that. And obviously, firstly, obviously, homeowners have cashed in on obviously high prices, and people are exiting the market and sold up, and then
landlords have cashed in on that as well, haven't they? I mean,
yeah, of course.
It's
I have seen some
from my
landlords.
point of view, I remember the credit crunch. Well, actually, a couple of years ago, I actually sold some as well. But
yeah,
I do remember the credit crunch, and I remember that actually since 2000, they'd gone up about double or triple in value to about 2006, 2007. So you really thought to yourself at that time, it's like, my God, I could never make that return. It's going to take me 20 years to get that return in investment. And do I think the value of the property is actually going to decrease? And that's what spurred me on to actually sell just before the crash. Some of the properties that had actually got a huge amount of profit in them. But I tell you what, my tax bill that year was horrendous. It was like, I could not believe it. And that is probably, actually, it's not the biggest time I've actually paid that higher tax bill now. It's probably just recently I'm actually paying higher than that now. Yeah. But that was, I couldn't believe that. I was paying more in tax than I was actually earning. Probably double or triple more than tax than I was actually earning on my normal day-to-day job. And I've never comprehended that before, how that was possible. But I think I was actually still working at that time.
Yeah, but I mean, there is a mixture of things. Like you say, obviously, homeowners have been cashing in on the high prices, and then they've been moving into rental properties, which is obviously taking up some of the supply. And then, obviously, buy-to-let landlords and things are looking at that, these high prices, and then exiting the market and selling the property when their tenant gets notice or whatever. And then that's obviously reducing the supply as well. So, I mean, these things bouncing off each other, that's what drives the demand even higher. I have seen a lot of landlords that have sold due to high prices, and I think you should. I mean, that can maybe defines between a landlord and an investor. Some landlords think, "Oh, I'm going to get a good price here. I'll exit," whereas they really could have refinanced and took money out and built their portfolio if you're an investor. So I think that's maybe the difference between landlord and investor sometimes, with how you view things. And obviously, if the property prices are going up, then obviously look at maybe refinancing and building bigger rather than I'll just take the cash and move on. Anyway, that's just my.
We're open to questions, guys. So Phil's actually come up with this, and this is actually quite a good one. Do you think the 4% extra tax is putting investors off? What's your thoughts on this?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, it does. Obviously, the tax implications have had. It has had an effect on some people, but again, I think it defines between some landlords look at the tax and think, "Oh God, I'm out," and move on. Investors who obviously look at it as I mean, it's a business at the end of the day, and it's all about the numbers, and there's ways to make it work, and it's not putting investors off, I would say, as such, but it does make you obviously evaluate how you're going to do your strategy.
Yeah, and for me personally, just as an investor, I look at it in the principle that, well, if property prices have gone up 14.8% in the last year, I'm still up 10.8%. If inflation has gone up 5% as well, then inflation eats into that at 5%. So I'm still up 5.8%. So even taking into account the ADS, the additional dwelling supplement, which is what Phil's talking about, the 4%, and the inflationary aspect, I'm still up 5.8%. in terms of the property prices, and that's not taken into account the rental income you could actually develop from it as well. And so, and that tends to be the now, if you do the numbers right, in between 10 and 15% net. So you could effectively be up over a year. You could be up 20% return on investment, and you're literally, well, that for me, it's a positive thing now, because you look after everything for me. So, and to be honest, if anybody thinks we're jumping about in Ferraris, we're not. Because I'll just qualify that, because I'm not doing it now. But I did it for the probably 20 years, didn't I? Probably the first 20 years, 25 years. I actually did it most of it myself, but you guys actually stepped in when we started to build the lettings division about 10 years ago, when we started all that and started to develop it and have it exactly how we wanted it. Hence the reason why you guys, I'm happy for you guys to take care of everything now. And really, the only decisions I'll make is any major improvements that need to be done. And you just run it by me just so I know the numbers before. So I actually can actually look at my bank and see if I've got enough money to pay it.
Yeah, that, I mean, like you say, it's only the high value repairs or upgrades and things that are run past you and getting it okay. I mean, other than that, I just crack on and do things because obviously I know how you. Obviously, we've got the working relationship where I know what you want done and how to do it properly. So.
And that's the key. That's what I like about it, Richard, because you understand what I want and what I want to achieve. That's where I thought in the beginning. So you know my journey, and I'll talk to everybody else about the journey.
Yeah.
Was I tried to successively when I was in industry as a financial controller and financial director. I wanted to be in charge of PLC. I wanted to be, the next Tiny Rowland, the next, Richard Brandt, for the older people that know them, the next Alan Sugar, person that was actually running, calling all the shots in the big PLC industry and probably reporting all the time in, the Sun newspaper and the Times newspaper. This is what Jim Parker's doing here. This is how he's restructuring this company. But at that time, I just felt that I couldn't get anybody else to actually follow the pattern that I wanted them to follow and do what I was asking them to do, because I knew this would set me free. But what I couldn't do, I couldn't get anybody else to understand that and understand how they should be working. It was just every single letting agency at that time tended to be the computer says no. Approach to things. It's like, well, we don't do that, and we don't do this, and we don't do that, and we just stick to that. And I'm like, but surely you've got to think about the person and what their strategy is and what they want to do and how they want to and what they want to achieve and how you're going to help them do that and how they want to know about things and if they want to be updated all the time or sometimes just on major things. Surely you want to tell people that. And it's like, making what you're talking about.
Yeah, I have noticed that.
And this is some big letting agencies. I'm talking about master franchises. I tried to get them to do that. And then I got to the point where when I retired, well, it wasn't a retirement, was it? It was just like I was managed to leave my job because I didn't need to work for anyone else anymore and I was financially free. When I did that, I felt that I want to take this a bit further and I want to actually develop my own thing. Because I realise out there that people are actually, it's a service that we need, but it's more importantly what I need. And that's how that came about. Anyway, we're digressing. Let's jump back onto this. So, looking at the rental sector from an investor relationship, the state of the general British economy, meaning with the uncertainty of the British economy in the early part of 2021, this meant that more people decide to rent than tie themselves into mortgages. That was a cultural thing more than anything. But it's like what he says, looking at the supply in Fife in the rental market, the short-term rents, it will continue to grow as some Fife landlords are actually abandoning the rental market. The government is throwing so much legislation and putting so much consultation papers. You can see on all these private forums for landlords and investors that they're running for the hills.
A lot of people are very confused about it, and
every single one of them is predicting doom and gloom for this market. And I'm going, there's opportunity on the horizon. Because there is. Because as soon as people actually panic and want to exit a market, that's an opportunity to get into a market and start buying. Definitely, because the market's still there. You just have to tackle the legislation. But if you're running your business as it should have been in the first place, then you're complying with the legislation anyway. All they're doing is rubber stamping it where, that's what it should be.
Yeah, I think, like you say, obviously, the properties that we manage and everything I manage for you is always kept up to obviously the regulations. So when they bring something new in or tweak something, it's just a case of a tweak, really. But when people haven't managed it correctly to begin with, and maybe they're private landlords and doing things, and then all of a sudden they've got all this raft of legislation in front of them that they need to adhere to, and it just overwhelms them and they just think I'm out. And I see that a lot. And that's obviously maybe not being.
That's basically because they have no idea what the legislation was in the first place.
Yeah, so they've not been educated in the first place. Yeah.
Let's take a quick look at what we've got in terms of the number of properties for Zoopla, because it's interesting to see this from time to time. So I'm on properties to rent in Fife. Let's type in Fife. So you're saying probably about 55?
There's about 55. 55.
68. So it's gone up a fair bit.
It's gone up, yeah.
But before then, anyway, I mean, before then, we were talking about what? We were talking about 55. We were talking about 68, and we're talking about 100 before pre-pandemic levels, weren't we? So you've got a lot of properties there. There's a few entrants coming into the market. There's people just added. I think I've got a sneaking suspicion this one's just been added. Whoever this is, let's just click on them. Scobie Property Management from Edinburgh. So a property management company. So that's why that number's going up quickly, because they've decided, they've probably been renting for ages, Richard, to be honest. But what they've decided to do is actually put themselves on the internet, because it looks like they've got a lot of student lets, doesn't it?
Yeah, that does look like
it all seems to be St Andrews. So they seem to be specialised in St Andrews. So that's bumped up the student lets with a new intake. Yeah, it's all St Andrews.
You're coming to about that time of year, so
yeah. So they've done that. Let's jump onto Rightmove and see what Rightmove says, because a lot of people don't want to go on Rightmove because Rightmove costs an absolute fortune. Yeah. So that's why we make sure we're still on it. So to rent, and let's see there. See, Rightmove's 54, so you'll probably find that they're not on Rightmove. That's why.
Yeah, they'll not be.
They can't afford to go on Rightmove because it's too dear for them. So they've just decided to go on a Zoopla. So the difference between them and Zoopla is probably 14, which is the amount of properties they've probably got on.
When we checked on Thursday, we had 55. I think we've put a couple on. We put a couple on Friday, so we had about 12 of that, and then we've probably got about 14 now. Interestingly, there, and what we spoke about on Thursday as well, is the price of 2 and 3 beds in the Glen Office area. And right at the top there, obviously, a 3-bed, £650 for a 3-bedroom house in Glen Office is just.
I could not believe that, honestly. I mean, I'm thinking 495 because that's all what I've always done, and I thought 550 at a push. But then you come back to me and say, "Wait a minute, 650," and I'm thinking, God. But to be honest, we could talk about that. But it is actually quite cheap in comparison to the inflationary aspect of how rents have gone up over the years. Because I remember back in 15 years ago, a 2-bedroom flat was actually £450 a month. And that same 2-bedroom flat, you're probably talking about 495 now.
Yeah.
So, it's not going up that much, but certain house types haven't they?
What
house types have they, and what areas have they? What areas and house types have gone up?
I think that obviously, like I say, the 2 and 3 bedroom houses in Glen Office have definitely went up and definitely increased in popularity. Places like Cooper, apartments in Cooper have always been popular, but prices in there have went up as well. And also, and a lot of, like, we've got a few detached bungalows and things. Bungalows always come at a premium in areas like Cooper and things. Anyway, they've bumped up. We just done one, Landale Gardens. I think it was a 2-bed, and I think we got about 800 or something for it. I mean, in the past we've been about maybe 650, 700. We're getting 800 for a 2-bed bungalow. Like I say, they do always come at a premium bungalow.
And what's the cost of a 2-bed bungalow?
Your 2-bedroom bungalow, you're probably looking about somewhere about 140, 150.
Okay. So let's just do a quick ready right
and
now.
Cooper,
How much?
I done that at 800.
So 800 times 12, 960 divided by 140. Yeah, 6.8% return, gross return. So that's gross yield. So gross yield, return on investment, ROI. That's really what everybody calls it. But we know we can leverage that up to a lot higher if you use the bank's money or other people's money. But that's another thing for the wealth creation show.
And the discussion I had, sorry to digress, just about rental price there, and I had this conversation with my landlord actually on yesterday, and he was obviously, we're speaking about rental demand and price point and things, and it's not always wise to set the rental price as high as you could get it. I mean, set it at what the kind of the market's obviously commanding at that time, but because of the amount of demand, when you've got so many good applicants applying at the same time, then you could use that opportunity to negotiate the rent up. I think advertising at silly high prices isn't really the way to do it. I think it's better to, if you've got that demand there, put it on, get the interest, then negotiate obviously the deal between yourselves and obviously the applicants. If you keep pushing up prices on the websites and things, then obviously we'll start getting talk of rental caps and things. And
Do you think the, for example, we talked about the Cooper market. Do you think the fact that they're going to be possibly building on the outskirts of Cooper quite a lot of properties, do you think that will actually take demand out of the rental market?
Maybe slightly. I don't really think that it'll have that great an impact. They would need to build quite. I mean, they are building quite a lot. It would need to be quite a lot to take.
Look at the classic example about Glenoffice. I mean, the Glenoffice is probably one of the most prolific places that a lot of properties are actually getting built, and still Glenoffice's got a huge demand, and still
that won't subside anytime soon.
Yeah.
Glenoffice has always been popular, but I think, like you say, it's the most we spoke about this. It's the most undervalued area, I think, in Fife, and you're picking up property at such a good price point. Rental prices are still on the increase. It's a really good area to invest in.
It's such a central location to the everywhere. You know, that's what I like about it so much. I mean, everybody goes on about things like the mixture of the flat roofs and the non-mortgageable properties and all the rest of it, but they're minority areas.
I mean,
in terms of where things are. So there is a golden opportunity for that area, and literally is a good investment strategy because the numbers work. So is it the case that people, you know, let's ask you this question, because I get asked this quite a lot, and let's get this out on the table. So is it a case that, you know, people need to rent, or they have no choice but to rent?
I think a lot of people renting is a choice that they make. I think a lot recently. I think a lot of people choose to rent. It's a lot easier. It fits in with them better. There's a lot less hassle renting a property than there is owning it. Speak for experience. I mean,
plus you're not tied into the exits and the entries, because when you think about it, if you'd bought, you know, you did rent in the beginning, and I rented as well in the beginning, but I rented for a year. So when you think about the logic of that, if I'd bought that flat at that time, it would have cost me about £2,000 or £3,000 to buy it, with the lawyers' fees and everything else and stamp duty at that time, because that was a lot of years ago, and then obviously refurb it as well, because I'd have to spend all that money doing it. And then literally I bought another house a year later. So then I would have had to pay maybe 2,000 or 3,000 in actually selling the house again, and that would have cost me about £6,000, and plus my mortgage payments if I had actually got it. So that would be about 10 grand. So for 1 year it would have cost me 10 grand when basically I rented it for what, £350 a month, which was literally 4,000 a year. So I saved myself about £6,000 by renting rather than actually by buying at that point in time. So do you think that's why people do that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people have cottoned on to the fact that there's a lot of advantages from renting a property. Financial aspect, people could rent. They don't have any responsibility with repairs, maintenance. They could just pass all that on, and it fits in their lifestyle. It's a lifestyle choice.
I tell you what, it's an easy gig as when you think about it as a tenant, and the logic of that, because I know what it's like as a house owner. So then you have to phone your engineer, and you have to get the engineer to come round, and you have to constantly phone them, and you have to be in for them and all the rest of it. Whereas sometimes with the rental option, you know, all we need to do is phone you, and then you arrange for somebody to come round. All their contractors are approved already. They've all been tested on my properties first, so they're all good at what they do, and that's why we've got them and rolled them out to everybody else. So they're approved. And sometimes it's like, well, I'm not going to be in. I don't need to be in, really. Just go and use the key and just get on with it, because we've used these contractors for years and we trust them and know them. And they just get on with it from day to day. And that's an ideal situation. So not only does renting actually do that and avoids the cost of having to repair everything, it also avoids the hassle of having to wait on everybody and actually arrange contractors.
Yeah,
I mean,
you get that done for you.
Time again on social media, don't you? Does anybody know a good decorator? Does anybody know a gardener? Does anybody know a plumber? So my radiator's falling off the wall, and it's like, well, if you were renting, you just phone your letting agency and let them take care of it. That's it. Job done.
And the thing is as well, if you're a homeowner, and whether you've got a home care package or you've got, do you know what I mean? If your boiler breaks down and it needs a part, needs replaced, I mean, you could be, before even an engineer walks through the door, you could be waiting a few days. I mean, unless we get a repair that's called in and it does need a part, or maybe the boiler's at the end of its life, obviously that's going to be a longer repair. Other than that, your engineer will be there within about 24 hours at the most. Do you know, if somebody phones me at night, they'll be there in the morning. Do you know what I mean? Or vice versa. It's a lot quicker turnaround than you would be if you were trying to arrange things yourself, and you've not got the hassle of doing it.
And I'm always amazed at how many, you know, now and again you get somebody popping out the woodwork saying, well, if that was Scottish Gas, they would be out And it's like, no, they won't. Scottish Gas basically turns up from 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock at night, 5 days a week, and they will not come out at the weekend for anything. They will give you advice on the phone, but they cleverly say it in their small print that they're not coming out, and it's all an advice line. But they say in their headlines, they give the implication that they're actually there all the time. So they say we're available 24/7, but the reality is they're not coming out 24/7. They're only available on the phone. That's it. And a lot of people don't realise that. Whereas boots on the ground, because we've got really good contractors, they will actually go out at weekends if it's absolutely necessary to get a job done in a situation where maybe the heating's completely down, there's a young family, or maybe something else that has to be rectified, like and there's an electrical problem that's just appeared for no reason at all. And a plumber as well. So these are all things that can actually be dealt with.
Drainage and things. I mean, all these aspects that are classed as emergency repairs, like obviously drainage, sewage, your heating, your hot water, electrical. Do you know what I mean? Or obviously a plumbing issue. We're lucky. Well, we're not lucky because we've worked for a lot of years to build up relationships with these contractors, and they are there at the end of the phone and will go out and drop in that for us.
My point of view as a landlord and investor, well, you know, a call out costs me more at the weekend. So I just have to suck it up and pay it because it's absolutely necessary. And that's another thing that people don't realise it's that you would get if you had your own house. So I think that tends to be why it's now an option for people to actually rent. This urban myth about, you know, it's just dead money isn't actually true. It's just something somebody made up in order to keep home ownership as the priority. Whereas if you see right around the world, home ownership is not a priority to people. It is actually in the continent in Europe. 60% of people actually rent in Germany, and about 80% rent in the Nordic regions all the time. It's an accepted practice because it gives people the mobility and the flexibility of labour and actually moving place to place. Look at it this way. And I'll ask everybody out there if you want to answer this question and give me a thumbs up. If you rented your house just now, you're actually in, supposedly the house of your dreams, would you continue to stay in that house or would you go and rent somewhere else? And I think for most people, I ask that question, the answer is typically, I would actually move to another property. But it's the fact that they're so settled in their property just now and they've got so much stuff to do that actually puts them off moving. Because then they've got all the exit and having to sell and all the costs involved, and then having to organise a mortgage and all that drama. Literally happens, and the pain is far too much that the gain has become incidental now. Whereas renting, it's like, I'm off. Especially
28 days.
Especially if you've got a furnished property. It's like, I'm off. I found another property. It's far better. So I'm off. And it gives you that actual flexibility. 28 days, you're absolutely right. The worst that you can come off if you've looked after your property is maybe the deposit is used for, you know, the rent because it needs to be, you know, loss of rent or anything like that. But that's all even covered as well now by the tribunal process. You know, so often it's straight away that the deposit actually gets handed back to the tenant. You know, there's no qualms about that, isn't there? You only hear about the horror stories, don't you?
I know. I mean, 9 times out of 10, it's a straightforward process. Safe deposits are in place there, obviously, as the impartial third party. They make the decisions in between. And that's quite a straightforward, and that's quite a seamless process, 9 times out of 10. And it's just the horror stories that get brought up and dragged across social media platforms and things. It's not always like that. And I think as long as you manage it properly, it's fine. But you're totally right about renting. I mean, on the majority countries in Europe and across America, renting is more the norm than it is to own.
Okay, good morning, James. How are you? If you've got any questions, give us a shout. If you've got any advice, then feel free to chip in. James is actually partners me on the Wealth Creation Show. So we do that on a Monday night at 6:30. So this is a show that's designed to increase everybody's wealth in 2022. So watch out for that 6:30 live on my public profile on our YouTube channel, on my LinkedIn channel, and on Twitter as well. So watch out for that. The Wealth Creation Show is 6:30 live on a Monday night. We're going to be talking about property sourcing this week, actually. So that'll be a really good one because now, even for people that own just now, when you think about it, even property sourcing for people that own just now and want to move and buy another property for themselves, this actually might be quite a good show anyway. because we're actually talking about how to source them before they get to market or before anybody else finds out about them. And ways to do that. And maybe we'll touch on negotiation techniques as well, which is a really good thing. Or maybe we might actually save that for the Investors Club on a Thursday, the last Thursday every month.
Last Thursday every month we're doing that,
yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the Fife house price growth. Do we think it will slow? So, you know, for those that actually own the property, the way house prices grew in 2021 actually surprised most people. Now, you know, at the start of the year, I was actually saying I think it's going to be 8 or 9% when everybody else was saying 5. But to come in at 14.8% is wow. That really is high. So the house prices according to Landlord just grew by 14.8% in 2021. Typical Fife home reaching 201,600. Now this goes in conflict because Zoopla actually said in December it was 186,000. But it's because Zoopla bases it on their information that they gather from everybody it sells on their website. So they gather that information. So they don't get every single one because Zoopla won't take into account things like private sales.
Yeah, it's only from their platform. Right.
Yeah, and off-market deals, it's only from their platform. Hence the reason why the wee bit disparity, because 20,000 is a lot of money.
Yes, yeah.
It's like, I just lost 20,000. That's what you would be doing, would it? You'd be panicking. You'd be like Home Alone running around the house. So many local landlords have actually helped by increasing the Fife house prices. So it might be a place to cash in for those for capital gains or either selling their buy-to-let property. Now, we touched on that at the beginning.
Yeah.
And it's all about the market supply by the demand, which is the market numbers actually chasing. Now, I know there's 16 people every single day in Fife actually make a decision to sell or buy a property. Now, how do I know that? Because literally I'm just taking the number of transactions actually sold and I'm dividing it by the number of days. And that's why we know on average that's what happens every single day.
Yeah.
Most commentators believe that nationally house prices will be between 3 and 5% higher by the end of 2022. Now, I've said in here, actually, I can see no reason why Fife house prices won't be in that range by the end of the year. But I still have a sneaking suspicion it's going to be higher.
I think it's going to be slightly higher than that, at least.
I've got a funny feeling we might even reach 10. And you know why I think that? Because if anybody's been watching my previous shows, when I look at that, now I did a Zoopla report the other day about UK house prices, but then I compared the average salary, which is 25,000, right? Mm-hmm. It's 25,000 in Fife, it's 25,000 in Scotland, and guess what? It's 25,000 in the UK. Okay, so everybody's got the same purchasing power on average. So what do you think the most affordable is? It's the lower house prices, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Fife, out of the whole of the UK, is still on midpoint. We're still on midpoint. We are not the top end of the spectrum in terms of house prices.
No, if you look at other areas, yeah.
Well, the average house price is 240,000. Okay, so if you divide 25 by 240,000, you get about 8 or 9 times your multiplier. But in here in Fife, you've got 201,000. I mean, that's only about 8 times. So if you compare 240, so there's still about 40, maybe 50,000 in appreciation to go, and that's effectively 25%. Yeah. To get to that same level, if that's the case. Now, we've got to take into account demographics. We've got to take into account employment capability here. We've got to take into account, you know, how much people pay for skills more than anybody else. But remote working's changed that all, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And that's why we're seeing everybody from bigger areas that were actually paying more for houses actually looking at Fife now and thinking, that's a great price point. And it's
we see it all the time.
I don't need to be near the office anymore. I don't need to commute to work anymore. I don't need to go into the office every single day. I've got the option now where I can have flexible working and I can work from home. The council's classic example, they do that now. They do that where you can work from home.
Yeah.
So when you take that into account, that's why I believe that house prices in Fife will continue to rise, probably more than that. Now, we talked about the split and the fact that east of Fife tends to rise a lot higher than the west of Fife. The central's kind of in the middle somewhere. Now, that's because one's more industrialised, and one's more farming and rural in terms of that. So that's now it used to be years ago where it was the top end and the bottom end. So the industrialised used to be all right along the bottom, and the farming community used to be at the top. But that's starting to shift in the demographics round, where it tends to be east and west now rather than top and bottom in terms of that. So that's why I believe that Fife house prices will be driven up more because of that, and clearly because of the lack of supply as well. We are not building enough houses in Fife. Now, I don't mean private houses, well, equally private houses, but they're actually quite a lot of money. I just mean social housing. We completely stopped. I mean, we can't. How can we change that? We can't. We'll have to. And then how could you build more? Because you've only got a finite amount of people with the skill to build houses. So what's going to happen is you bring more people in, you pay more money for these people, inflation goes up because that money goes into the supply, and then inflation starts to push interest rates up, and then interest rates curb demand because that's the theory. And in the easy economic terms, I think it's macro they call it. So macro is big vision, micro is like the real nitty gritty stuff.
Macro and micro,
So in the macro terms, in a easy world where that all worked, and these two or three things worked seamlessly, then that would then push house prices up again because inflation would go up. But then demand would bring down, so that would maybe level off. But I still think we're at a point where it will still continue to grow because of this multiplier.
Definitely, and I think housing supply is just the dominating factor in Fife. It will be for some time.
Yeah. So coming back to the landlord thing, I mean, the mortgages, the rates will rise, and it has been factored in already. The reduction in tax relief for the Fife Buy-To-Let landlords with mortgages in the last 5 years has actually been hard on some landlords, yet this has been tempered by the inexpensive ultra-low mortgages for buy-to-let investors. Yet even with the Bank of England increase in base rates, landlords with big deposits of 40% or more can actually benefit from low rates. For example, at the time of actually writing this, you get a buy-to-let mortgage at 1.49 for 5 years. Well, 40% deposit. That's crazy, eh? I mean,
which is crazy, and if you're in the position to put the higher deposit down, then you could benefit for that, obviously.
Well, look at it this way. Well, to be honest, that's where your money should be. If you're looking for the best investment class ever, you can't go wrong with property, because ask your granny if they should have bought property 50 years ago, and the answer to that is probably yes, because they were buying them at £100 for a property. And what are these properties worth now? They're worth hundreds of thousands now, and yet that's only holding on to them. And then at the same time, if they had actually bought them and rented them, they'd earn money out of them at the same time, as well as the price going up as well.
Yeah,
that's a win-win.
Yeah, that is a win-win, because you've got that long-term income, plus you've got the capital appreciation as well. So
so Bank of England base rates going up 1.49%, 5 years. That's a fix, though. That's certainty. So that's brilliant. Meaning borrowing on 180,000 on a £300,000 purchase would cost you only 719 a month. And so if that, let me do a quick calculation on that, and I'll just double check that, because I just want to make sure. So 180, 123 times 0.0499. So that divided by 12 equals 223 interest only. So a 719 a month in capital repayment over a 25-year mortgage, or £224 interest only. Now, a £300,000 house, Richard, what would that rent for?
Well, your £300 house, you're talking about 4 or 5 bedrooms probably. So you're up there. You're up there around about the 1,000 mark, if not even slightly more, depending on where it is.
You're getting £1,000 for your rent, and it's costing you £224 to service, and that's on a 5-year fixed rate deal. That's a no-brainer, isn't it?
If you're putting that in an area like the East Nuke or whatever, rental price will be higher than that.
Yeah, and if you're doing Airbnb, it'll possibly be even higher. But the servicing costs. That's why we don't get involved in Airbnb.
Yeah, Airbnb's.
I always think to myself, Airbnb is just somebody wanting to be busy.
Yeah, as a niche that obviously you need to be aware that there's a lot more involved than just rent out for a few days at a time. There's a turnover in between. There's a lot of different legislation attached to it and things. So Airbnb is not as straightforward. It could be lucrative if you do it right and you've got the time to do that.
Yeah.
But Yeah, we are.
So those were a 25% deposit, might pay slightly more, but the mortgage rate's only 1.64%. So, I mean, who can, well, you'll not remember the
I was
mortgage
just
rate
going.
between
You're
14
going
and
to talk about higher
15%.
rental
In
mortgage rates.
1992, I think you were just, what age were you in 1992?
I would have been 6.
Aye, so you'll not remember 14 and 15% interest rates. I remember that very well. I was lucky. I was on a budget mortgage which fixed it for a year anyway, based on the
Yeah.
current years before. So I went up to 15, came back down to 12. So by the time I got to the next year, it was back down to 12, but it was still at 12%, the mortgage rate. So proportionally of our income, our mortgage was round about 50 or 55% of our take home.
Yeah.
Pay. That's why we were beans on toast for a long time. You were literally scraping in the ashtrays for a fag dope for your roll ups to see if you could get. That was a way back in the early 90s. It's like I'm desperate. I can't afford any cigarettes. I'll go to the ashtrays. I'll see what I've got from previous. I remember those days very well. So so with inflation rising, the Bank of England already indicating further interest rate rises on the cards, I think we'll be around by 1% by Christmas in
Yeah.
terms of, I don't think the bank would want to push it any higher for the fear of upsetting the market. You can't have now this is the key here, this is what everybody needs to understand. There shouldn't be another housing crash. And I don't
No.
think there will be, because the government will do everything in their power to avoid that, because they know what happened the last time. And they can't afford to take that hit again with this situation. So they might let inflation take its course or look at other measures to take that out of the economy by possibly, and I definitely think they should be doing this, is indirect taxation. I mean,
Yeah.
why on earth would you want to pay more interest or charge more interest on a mortgage, which the money doesn't go to you at all, it goes to other people, when in actual fact you could actually just take the demand out of the extra money by raising indirect taxation, and that allows you to pay back all the debt we've borrowed. That's
Yeah.
a no-brainer. I mean, are we just doing this because it's no popular? It's we've got billions to pay back. We better start paying it back now, and it's a better strategy than actually just throwing it into a bank and letting somebody else get it, for investment. That makes no sense at all to me. It's actually better just pay the debt back. But then that's why that's all about the wealth creation show. That's all
Yeah.
about that different level of thinking and understanding how wealthier people think. Because they all think differently. They think completely different. Because if you thought the same as a wealthy person or somebody that was a millionaire or a multimillionaire, you would be a millionaire already. That's
Yeah,
the
we
key.
spoke about that a few times, Jim, and it's like wealthy people do have a different mindset and a different thought process and approach to money as
Yeah,
as people that obviously maybe don't have as much wealth. And then I think they're good topics that you cover, like you say, in your wealth creation show on the Monday. So
yeah.
it's really I would recommend anybody jumping in and listening to that on a Monday because it's quite interactive as well, which I think is great. Both you and James are quite
Well,
interactive in that.
literally the format we've taken, it's like
Yeah,
instead of actually getting a venue and actually everybody sitting at a table and having to meet there all the time, or everybody actually having to pay for the location, we've actually said, I tell you what, we'll just do it online, and
yeah,
there's no cost to that really. It's just time. But we don't need to travel. We don't need to all that expense. We don't need to get in our car. We don't need to hire a hotel or anything like that. We'll just do it
yeah,
all online and save all the money. And that just still teach all these same techniques but actually save ourselves a lot of money doing it.
mhm,
That's the key here. So that's why the wealth creation show came about, to everybody for benefiting of everybody else about ways that we could do something to increase each other's wealth.
yeah,
James is a real good way of doing that, as well as I'd chip in with the fact that I've done it all these years for 30
mhm,
years, so I understand that. So the key here as well, though, I'll go back to this about landlords, about interest
yeah,
rates and mortgage rates. There's 1 in 5 landlords still on a variable rate just now. So if I was you as a landlord, I would really seriously think about actually fixing your
get a
mortgage
fixed rate.
now so it doesn't increase anymore in the future, maybe for the next 3 to 5 years.
If you
But
get
then
5 years, you're onto a winner. You get a
but
5 year fix.
the flip side of that is then if the price goes up, then you can't remortgage it or unless you take a penalty. So and I know that I have that personal experience because
Hmm.
I've got mortgages which are lifetime trackers of base. Wait for it. plus 0.99. Wow. So literally I'm paying 1% for all these years on interest only on a lifetime tracker. So I got deals at 30 years, and I'm loath to let them go unless the price has actually increased significantly, or unless I need that dramatically. Because then what's going to happen is I'll eventually pay 4 times as much interest. If I do that, eventually that'll come round. But I prefer to be on the lifetime trackers, to be honest. So there's a fine line.
I would leave them as they are.
But there's other properties I've got with my other company. It makes absolute sense, because then I know what the rates are with that. And again, that's about wealth strategies. So we will talk about that in successive wealth creation show. We talk about, is it worth actually remortgaging and refinancing, or do you sit tight? And I'll be able to show people practical examples, because I've done it myself, and I've not done it myself sometimes as well. So I show both sides of the coin there. So maybe it's time to consider fixing your mortgage, but then you have to take advice for that. You have to work out your numbers. So what to work out is what the long-term cost is. Here's a quick one. What the long-term cost is of fixing against what the long-term cost is of actually leaving it to float and actually be a variable rate. Okay, so that's the ones. Right, here we come. This is your bit now.
Yeah.
The new APC rules could cost Fife landlords £10,000 per property. I'm out of business overnight if that's the case.
No, I think as long as you get ahead of the game and are aware that these kind of changes are imminent, then I think that you should be okay. There is going to be a cost to some landlords. I mean, there's properties that are going to be quite difficult to bring up to certain EPC levels. I mean, the law currently stands that Fife landlords need energy performance certificates of at least an E at the moment. But my advice would be to everybody at present, be working towards having at least a D. Now, D is the national average rating. And I think if you're at D, it's quite comfortable for the time being. Although, obviously, it's anticipated that the increase in EPC requirement for private rental properties in England and Wales will be an EPC rating of C for all new rental tenancies, and then any existing tenancies 2025, 2026 will be the C, and then existing tenancies will be up to a C by 2028. Now, the legislation is all in place for Scotland as well. It's just not been enforced yet. So, like I say, I think people should be working towards, or at least if you're doing new buy-to-let purchases, look at things that are at a level D or have the potential to easily be brought to a D or a C. You don't want to be purchasing something that's really low, and it's going to cost you a lot to obviously bring that.
That's when you've got a lot of landlords are now looking at their properties and thinking, I've got an E, I better sell it. Because
not necessarily.
They're looking at the prohibitive cost of actually trying to upgrade an E to get to a D, and they're thinking, I've got no chance.
It depends what kind of property it is, and also there is going to be grants and there's going to be things available. In Fife, I think the worry for me, we do a lot of our stock as ex-local authority, and these kind of properties are easily brought up an EPC rating. There's a lot of rural properties as well. I do a lot of stuff for farmers and things across, like farmers' cottages and things, and a lot of them are quite low EPC ratings. And to bring them up to code, it's like, well, how are we going to do that? There's no cavity wall. There's no facility to put maybe loft insulation, so you're looking at suspended floor insulation, and do you know what I mean? You start going down that track, and that's expensive. So I think that's.
Is there a dispensation for that? Is there some sort of fallback position where it's like, if it is that cost prohibitive,
It's been discussed, and obviously we've got surveyors and things that do our energy performance certificates, and I've picked their brains for the last couple of years because I knew it's coming, and I think they're going to have to put some sort of breaker in there where, like, this property is never going to be able to achieve a certain level of EPC. So is it going to be exempt or at a certain or be allowed to be let at a certain level because of obviously the structure of the build? Or, do you know what I mean? They're going to have to reevaluate that, because it is going to be very difficult to bring some properties up to even a D. It's going to be difficult for some older style stone built cottages and things like that. But like I say, the majority of what our stock is like I say, these ex-local authority properties most of them are average D anyway, quite easily brought up to a C. But then the problem is that like 1,959 and 45,000 off the 2,965,500 registered rental properties on the EPC database have an energy rating of a D or below. So I mean, there's quite a lot that are not even at the national average now. So there's a lot of work to be done, and I think, and I do keep plugging it and keep covering it with landlords, existing landlords, and new people I speak to. Be aware of this, because if it gets left to the last minute, like a lot of things, it's going to be an issue.
The key, I would say, is just constantly improve your properties. You know that I do that all the time. So a lot of my top line. Well, last year I was looking at my accounts for last year, and we spent about 68,000 on improvements and repairs.
Yeah,
68,000. Now, that's a proportion of our top line rent. That's a huge proportion, but I'm quite happy to do that, because I realise that in order to keep up with the times and to not have the full impact of these cost increases, it's absolutely necessary. It's a lot of money and a lot of investment, believe me, and percentage-wise of the top line rent, but it's absolutely necessary to do that. Whereas a lot of people are actually just leaving it to, a lot of landlords are leaving it to the last minute, and then they're realising they've got a mountain to climb rather than a hill.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. So I mean, like I say, that is the one end of the spectrum. Obviously, these properties that are really low in EPC ratings are going to have a lot of work to bring them up to code. But generally, there's a lot of properties, and there's a lot of cost-effective and or low-cost ways to upgrade your EPC rating. I mean, whether that be energy-efficient light bulbs, putting insulation around your water tank, draft excluders. Do you mean all these simple things that are relatively inexpensive? I mean, they're not like going to break the bank, and these will all bring your EPC rating up.
Yeah, it's when you get into, we recommend you should have a ground source air source heat pump.
Well, that's expensive.
I just think £15,000 before we've started.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a few rentals with the ground source heat pumps, and they're good and they're energy efficient and things, but they cost a lot.
We'll certainly not recover 15,000 for them. And when you think about the running costs and how much that'll cost to maintain it, and then the breakdowns over the years, it's only a matter of time before it becomes cost prohibitive. And I have a sneaky suspicion, Richard, it's going to end up like when they had let's have the warm air convection heating in properties. And in years to come, everybody's written them out. What a ground source air recovery heat pumps. It's like, that's lunacy.
Yeah, and a lot of the ground source pumps and things that have went in, I mean, obviously, because they're new systems and things, are under guarantee or under warranty. And if anything happens, the installer, whether we've got one recently, I think it's can't remember who installed it, but they've been out to look at it and sort it, whatever. But other than that, if it's not under warranty and things, you're going to it's them you have to get back out, because general maintenance guys and contractors and things don't know how to repair them. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things, a lot of questions raised with them with that.
So the advice then is to get every landlord to look at their full EPC report of their rental property, and if they haven't got one, contact us, because you should have one. To be honest, if you've not got an EPC and you're not shown and clearly shown the EPC, if you've not given the tenant the EPC upon move-in, that's effectively breaking the law, isn't it?
It is. You need to be, and I'll tell you. I mean, when obviously, I remember years ago, EPCs when it was first and brought around and things. That, I mean, it was relevant to us because we knew, but no one really acknowledged it. But now it's more relevant, and even tenants ask, "What's the EPC rating on this?" And do you know what I mean? Obviously, everybody's a lot more eco-friendly and the carbon footprint, and want to know how energy efficient a property is, because again, it will save them money on their utility bills and things. But apart from all that, it is against the law to rent a property without a valid EPC in place.
This is the reason, the fundamental reason. This is exactly all this legislation coming in. It's the reason I think our economy will still continue to boom and inflation will still continue to grow. We're sitting at 1.3 million job vacancies already in the marketplace. It's a record amount of job vacancies, and yet we've got this demand now for people needing to install and improve all these properties right around Britain to this EPC standard. Plus, we've got the smoke and heat detector legislation for normal residential property coming in a couple of days' time on the 1st of February. So effectively, when you think about the amount of jobs that are created out of that, the amount of income that's put into the economy, with people spending their money and investing their money on all this, it's just going to create even more demand for resources and more demand for services and more money in the economy and more people making money. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That's why we're here, to live a lifestyle for and create a lifestyle for the people around about us and ourselves as well. So but that's just going to make it even more. And the government's going to rake in, by the way, we worked out, Bob Terrace and myself, how much the government would rake in off the heat detector and smoke detector legislation. If every single household got it in Britain, or maybe in Scotland, they're going to raise 18 billion in extra VAT. 18 billion in extra VAT. Every house is going to have to buy all these, these kits. And then when you work at the 20% VAT on every single one, and then you take into account every single contractor that's going to be installing them, possibly VAT rated as well, the revenue is going to be a bit handy, isn't it? And the job creation is going to be a bit handy as well. But that's on top of the 1.3 million that we're still trying to get just now. So the jobs market is going to be really buoyant. Hence the reason why I think the economy is still going to continue to boom.
Yeah. Which is a good sign. So yeah, but I mean, to touch on the EPC thing, I mean, if people are unsure about what they should be doing with their rental property and getting the EPC up, speak to us, speak to myself. We've got really good contractors that obviously carry out EPCs and do other recommendations of what upgrades need to be done and things. But I think as a rule of thumb at the moment, I think you should be aiming for at least a D, like the national average, and keep in mind 2025, they're looking to bring everything up to a rating C.
So maybe these Fife landlords or landlords out there currently buying properties to add to their rental portfolio should consider their buying strategy. In the past, it's been normal for Fife Buy-To-Let investors to be attracted to inexpensive older properties that need an overhaul. However, with the potential energy efficiency laws coming into the game and into play, it's irrational to suggest that to buy-to-let landlords to be more predisposed to buying slightly newer properties rather than having the cost of upgrades to meet the potential energy targets. Classic one just now is, I know a property, it possibly is going to be an off-market deal, and we're discussing that just now, but I know one of these properties actually has the cavity wall is so big in between that you actually can't do cavity wall insulation in it
because it's
they
too
don't
wide.
recommend it. So therefore it deems it straight away the fact that it might actually fail the EPC rating. However, we know on the cards that potentially when that happens and you can't do anything about that, there is a dispensation in the EPC rules for that in the future. So you've got no other choice, because you don't want to take more housing out of the stock, for people in demand, because then you've got less places for people to live. We all need a roof over our head.
Yeah, I mean, as important as EPC ratings are, there has to be some leeway there. If there's not always going to be the option to bring things up to a certain level, and I think
what's your final conclusions on this then?
On the EPC ratings?
Well, just on everything
just
in general.
In general, I think. Yeah, well, I mean, the wind down for this show, I think, is that I'm quite excited about 2022. There's a lot went on in the last couple of years. 2021 has paved the way for investors, I think, and the rental market, obviously, which is really interesting for me. And I think 2022 is just going to continue in that trend. And I don't see the market taking a dip or crashing like anybody maybe worries about.
So I'll say to most landlords out there, if you've got sitting tenants in your property and you're thinking of exiting the market, then quite happy. I'm buying. That's the reality.
Yeah.
And I'll say that out there. So
and there's a lot of others like you,
Jim, as well. If you want to pass that on and you're happy to do that, I can talk to you about that. And we've got investors that can talk to you about that as well. And we could do something where we maintain that and keep people in their tenancy, because they don't have any other choice. They don't have a house to buy. So if you put all these properties in the market, they need somewhere to live. So that's an option. So roll back the clock 20 years and making money from buy-to-let was easier than falling off a log. Yet the increased legislation, regulation, and the change to the requirements of the British economy and the requirements of the tenants who want rental property, making money won't be as easy over the next 20 years. It amazes me that 11 out of 20 landlords do not use a letting agent. Amazing, eh? 11 out of 20 landlords do not use a letting agent. That's crazy, because they could be making a lot more money with the time that they're utilising someone else to try and save effectively what is the price of a cup of coffee every single day on their rental property. That's mental. And yet they'll run out and spend £5 at Starbucks. They'll not even spend £2.50 having a letting agent look after their property.
And these are landlords exiting the market when all this legislation comes
in. Well, because they don't understand the dynamics.
Yeah.
So moving forward, savvy landlords more and more use a letting agent, not only to collect the rent, but manage their property to build up a portfolio they can withstand as well. If you're an existing letting agent does not offer such advice, or you're self-managing landlord, then let's have a chat about the rental future. And that's really what I would say to people. There's nothing, it's good to talk, as BT used to say. It's good to talk, and it doesn't cost you anything to get advice from us in the beginning about what you should be doing, and then you should decide. And until tomorrow, we'll be doing Building Profitable Wealth tomorrow at 10:30. Watch out for that show. And until next time, guys, I'm Jim Parker for Fife Properties TV.
Thanks, Jim.
Bye.
Bye.